Hey scholars, it's Mr. Vandenberg again, coming with some more notes on migration this time. They've changed the requirements for the migration part of the unit, so I'm going to tell you some stuff that maybe isn't on the exam, but is really important to know anyways. Basically, migration is the second way that population can change in a country other than having babies. And there are many reasons why migration happens. One thing that's important to keep in mind is that migration migrants come from their country of origin. So this is where they originated from, to the country of destination, which is where they show up. This can become confusing a little bit when you talk about money going back to the origin and stuff, but just keep those terms in mind because that's how we're going to refer to the countries. So here's some stats for fun. I'm not going to go over them because you can read. If you can't, then I suggest going to World 1. More fun stats. Yay for Mexicans. All right, terms. Lots of terms for migration that are important to know. Emigration, you're leaving. Immigration, you're entering. Internal migrations means like within the nation itself. So if I move from Boston to DC, that's internal migration. My friend who moved from here to Sweden and then to Germany for a job, she was an international migrant. So she went from one country to another. Forced migration is something that I am particularly interested in, mostly because my wife studied this for her master's and her PhD. And it's just something I've gotten really passionate about. And it's something also that IB Geography has included more and more of in this curriculum. So it is very important to know these terms because some of them are internationally protected under the law, and other ones are people that don't have as many protections, and we're going to see that some bad things can happen to those people. A refugee is someone who is forced to leave their country due to war, some kind of environmental disaster, or persecution. Like, there is a much longer definition in the Geneva Convention, but basically it's someone who has to leave their country or else they are going to be killed, basically. And you have to leave your country to be a refugee. People who don't leave their country but feel like they can't live in their town or that area any longer, so they wander elsewhere inside that country, they are internally displaced people, or IDPs. Refugees have international protections where countries are required to take them in and take care of them, and the UN sets up camps to help with refugees. But internally displaced people, they are still citizens of that country, and so they often do not get the support of the international community as much, but they're in just as much danger. An asylum seeker is someone who has left their country and they show up at a second country and claim, I am a refugee. I am looking for safety. But that country gets to determine, do I really think you're a refugee? And there's a lot of gray area there. If they don't think you're a refugee, then they might deport you back. Trafficked people. We're going to talk about them later, but they're people that are forced to go to another country, usually as laborers or sex laborers. So with migration, it's not all forced, but like the focus of what we're going to talk about in class and the project we're going to do is on forced migration, but there is definitely voluntary migration. Like people just move for a lot of different reasons. And also it's important to remember that forced migration isn't only because you feel like someone's going to shoot you or something. It could be for environmental disaster as well. So the example I have here is Haiti. This is their parliamentary building, their Capitol building, before and after the earthquake in 2010. So when Haitians needed a place to flee to because of this earthquake and the disasters that came about because of that, the United States let them into the country as environmental refugees under this temporary protected status that we have in this country. and some other populations that have temporary protected status, or some Somalians, some El Salvadorans, some Hondurans, who came during times of conflict or environmental disaster in their country. So they're all under temporary protected status, which means they shouldn't be able to be deported, but you never know with our administration. Migration terms, more of them. Remittances. This is a fancy word for something that's not super fancy. So when people come to a country of destination and they get a job and they send money back home, that money has a term, and it's called remittances. So IB used to require that students memorize this definition. I feel like that might be a good thing to do, just so you remember it. But it's a fun word to throw out there. You sound like a smart person when you're like, Mother, are we going to send remittances back home after we get our paycheck this week? Push and pull factors. A push factor is why you leave your country. So lots of examples. A pull factor is a reason that you came to that country that you chose. So this is something we're going to talk about a lot in class, which is migration a positive or a negative for a country? And so for a country of destination, where those immigrants are arriving, there are definitely positives that can come out of them taking jobs, improving companies, paying taxes, and all that good economic stuff. There's also the boost to our culture and becoming a multifaceted nation, and all sorts of good diversity things that you're probably familiar with being at this school. But there is a concern that if you have too many people coming into the country, then they will sap the resources of that country. So a country might be worried that they're going to take the fresh water, the food. They might take all the jobs. They might cause conflict with people that need jobs or don't get along with them. So there are some concerns that countries have about getting too many immigrants. For the country that they left, there are actually some good things that could happen there too. So those people that left, they might send remittances back home. There are some countries where half of the money made in their country is money that was sent by immigrants back to their family at home, which is kind of a sad situation where your economy is so bad that half the money in your country came from a foreign country. But if they didn't leave, then they would never have sent money back. It could be that your country's overpopulated and you can't provide resources, and so it gives you a little bit more of a cushion to provide for those that are left. But it could also mean that there are talented people, economically active people that are leaving your country and draining that country of brain power and work power. So there are there's tons of models that try to explain how migration happens and why. I'm going to give you 3 of them. I'll try to explain them just to help you understand migration, but I really hope they don't ask you about this on the exam. I know I'm not going to quiz you on an exact model, but it might be good to name drop a model in there, impress me, So you might talk about the Todaro model. This one is kind of the most basic. Todaro just said, people move because they want to make money. Yeah, money's good. So, yeah, money drives migration. So if a place sees that people are leaving because they're looking for better jobs, then they need to invest in those rural areas, those peripheral areas, to try to keep people there so they're not constantly leaving. Another model is the stepwise migration model. This one says that migration always happens from small places in steps, larger and larger and larger, until people end up in a city. So very rarely do people head back from the city to villages. It's usually that people go from villages maybe to small places, or they skip right over and go to the city. Lee's migration model, I think this one is interesting. It's sometimes a little confusing, but it goes back to that push-pull thing. So instead of it just being like push, I don't want to live here anymore because I can't find a job, and pull, oh look, a job, I'm going to move there. Like, life isn't that simple. So there are intervening obstacles, Lee's words, that change how people get from place to place, the corridor. And so these could be political issues that come up. It could be bureaucracy, like trying to get a visa. It could be that the job outlook changes. It could be that family pulls you from one place even though you don't want to leave. Maybe your route got cut off if you're walking or taking a boat. So Lee just says, like, things are more complicated. Like, you might want to go from little town of 5 houses and go to the city, but there are all these things that are maybe in your way. And there's a lot of positives and negatives of living in both places. So it's a much more complicated thing than just saying, oh, that's a poor country and that's a rich country. There's always more to it than that. And we're going to study that in class. Anti-trafficking. This is one part that was not in the curriculum in the past. It is in the curriculum now. I'm excited because you should learn about it. I'm not excited because it's depressing. But human trafficking is the trade of humans for forced labor or sexual slavery, or to make them sexual workers. Like, I feel like it's the same thing. This is becoming a huge problem. There's actually more slaves now in 2018 than there were during the Atlantic slave trade. And you might think, yeah, well, we have 7.5 billion people now, but it's been like 200, 300 years. How have we not figured this out? That people shouldn't be enslaved. So who's at risk? So it's in this unit because refugees and migrants are most at risk. So these are people fleeing, they leave with nothing, they desperately need help, and people might offer them help, but it's not the kind of help that they need. So if you're interested, there's a link there of the CNN reporter who actually video recorded a slave auction in Libya when she was undercover. It's very interesting. LGBTI people, a lot of countries criminalize same-sex behavior, and so they might flee or be forced out of their country, and they're liable to be picked up, kind of the same. All these populations is people that need help, and they get tricked or cajoled into these relationships. People with disabilities, there's a lot of countries where they're like professional, quote unquote, panhandlers. So someone who's injured, that someone will put them out on a street corner, make them collect money from sympathy, and then they take part of the cut of what that person earned. And stateless people that have fled, maybe they're not refugees, but they have no papers, so no one can find them if they're taken. So the laws for anti-trafficking look really nice, but they're not really used enough. So this is one of those things where, like, politically there's a lot of agreement, like, yes, people should not be slaves. But when you say, okay, what are you going to do for those people that are enslaved? It's like, the UN will do something? So 90% of countries say, yes, the UN should, like, protect, prevent, support, all that good stuff. But 3/4 of countries have anti-trafficking laws, which means a quarter don't. And those are usually the countries where people are operating out of. And then money usually goes toward prevention, like trying to get these organizations to stop kidnapping people. But there's still all those people that are enslaved, and no one seems to be going and saving them. So there are NGOs, non-governmental organizations, that try to educate people and try to get in the way of traffickers and try to support people that are saved from trafficking situations. And that's really the best bet right now. So this is my plug, that if you want to help, if this is something that really bothers you, there are a lot of organizations that work on this. There's an article from CNN that lists a ton of organizations that help. The one that I know of, just because my church and myself have given money to them, is IJM, International Justice Mission. They actually have an office in DC. Maybe they need volunteers, I don't know. But it's citizens and non-governmental people that can make just as big of a change as the UN with their fancy laws that no one follows. So there's our depressing end to our migration talk. Um, Hopefully in class we will be able to get to your questions and really hash this out, and then we're going to do a sort of Socratic seminar debate style thing on forced migration. So see you later.